A meme pops up in my social media feed telling me that the difference between success and failure is simply giving up. A few posts later, another meme pops up telling me that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting different results. I think these two things can't be right at the same time. Maybe more so that there's a fundamental contradiction in our attitude to repetition. On the one hand, it's seen as a lack of innovation and creativity, but on the other hand, it denotes resilience, persistence, and determination. Welcome to Articulate. My name is Daniel Trump. Why do artists repeatedly paint the same subject? Artists have long returned to the same motif, as though the act of repetition might unlock something that eluded them the first time. Claude Monet painted haystacks, poplars, and the facade of Rouen Cathedral again and again, not because he wished to perfect them, but because he wanted to capture the drift of light and atmosphere, to show that a single subject is never the same twice. Paul Cézanne did something similar with Mont Sainte-Victoire, approaching the same mountain as an optical and structural problem, a place where he could test colour, form and perception. Mondrian, in contrast, revisited trees, dunes and the sea in order to strip them down, abstracting them step by step until they became rhythms and grids, hinting at the universal structure beneath appearances. Others have returned to a motif for psychological reasons. Francis Bacon restaged the figure of the screaming Pope, or the face of George Dyer, as if repeating an unresolved emotional drama. Edvard Munch repainted scenes such as the sick child and the kiss, treating each new version as a way of confronting memory and unrest. Lucian Freud used the same sitters, Lee Bowery and Sue Tilley, to probe what prolonged looking can reveal about the body's vulnerability, weight and presence. And Giorgio Morandi, in his studio in Bologna, spent decades shuffling the same bottles and jugs, turning minimal rearrangements into subtle meditations on tone, interval and stillness. And then we arrive at Georgia O'Keeffe. While many artists repeated a theme in order to analyse, to abstract or to exercise, O'Keeffe returned to a place, the road to the Cerro Pedernal, and the mountain itself became her fixed point, a site she painted not to solve an artistic problem, but to reaffirm a relationship. She once said that God would give her the mountain if she painted it often enough. Whether taken literally or not, the sentiment gestures towards something deeper. To paint the same place repeatedly is to acknowledge that the place shapes you as much as you shape it. Today we'll explore what it meant to O'Keeffe to return to painting the mountain Pedernal time and time again, and how repetition can be a form of devotion, discovery and becoming. Georgia O'Keeffe lived between 1887 and 1986. She became one of the most distinctive artists in American modernism, known for her close-up flower paintings and abstracted landscapes. Born in rural Wisconsin and trained in Chicago and New York, she moved early towards an independent visual language shaped by experiments with charcoal abstraction and an insistence on her personal vision. Her career intertwined with the photographer and gallerist Alfred Stieglitz, who championed her work, exhibited it at his famous 291 gallery, and played a decisive role in establishing her reputation. Their partnership was intense, creative, deeply formative, but also fraught. Stieglitz's serial infidelities wounded O'Keeffe profoundly, contributing to her eventual physical and emotional collapse in the 1930s. And now it was in the aftermath of that rupture that she turned increasingly towards the landscapes of New Mexico, a place that offered distance, autonomy, and the possibility of artistic renewal. Although Georgia O'Keeffe would later treat Cerro Pedernal as a commanding solitary presence, identifying the very first time she painted it is surprisingly difficult. In her early New Mexico works, the mountain often appears only implicitly, folded quietly into the wider topography, rather than announced as a distinct subject. Art historians frequently point to Diaz's skull with Pedernal, painted in 1936, as the earliest mature example, in which Pedernal is recognisably present. Here the mountain sits low on the horizon, secondary to the suspended skull, but clearly part of the visual field that she was beginning to claim as her own. This subtle inclusion marks an important moment. Pedernal enters her pictorial vocabulary, not through a dramatic debut, but as a gradual seepage into the landscape she was already constructing. Over the following years, its significance intensifies, culminating in the early 1940s with paintings such as Pedernal, 1941-42, where the mountain finally steps forward as the central motif. In the end, O'Keeffe's persistent return to Pedernal resists any single explanation, and that multiplicity is part of its power. The mountain may have offered her formal clarity as silhouette, so precise it seemed made for modernist distillation. It may also have been a site of emotional anchoring in the aftermath of her rupture with Stieglitz, a place where solitude could become renewal rather than withdrawal. Pedernal held geological time within its strata, inviting a slower, deeper mode of looking that resonated with her own desire to paint the infinite. And of course it became a personal myth, a mountain she half-jokingly claimed God would give her if she painted it often enough. Returning to Pedernal was perhaps a way of returning to herself. Each version is a slight recalibration of scale, colour, season, feeling, as though she were testing how the mountain and how she alongside it changed over time. In painting Pedernal again and again, O'Keeffe turned repetition into a form of fidelity to the land, fidelity to her vision, and fidelity to the evolving self that stood before the same summit, but never as the same person. Thank you so much for listening to Articulate. Please remember to like, subscribe and comment, and your support is much appreciated.